there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Monday, July 23rd, 2012. I have two very important interviews for you to hear today. First, an expert on the Chinese PLA will tell us about a prediction for war from a top Chinese general. Later in the program, private investigator Doug Hagmann has some chilling new information from his high-level source inside the Department of Homeland Security. We are in the countdown to a global financial collapse and a third world war. I'll give you a brief update on the latest developments. I encourage you to visit TrueNews.com every weekday for detailed information. It's happening so fast now that I can no longer report all of it during a 1 hour radio program. First, months ago, I prepared you for something sinister to happen on July 20 with the release of the Batman movie The Dark Knight Rises. 30 minutes into the new day, shortly after midnight, a demon-possessed 24-year-old man, James Holmes, entered a movie theater and ruthlessly shot to death 13 innocent people, including children. He also wounded 70 more people in the Aurora, Colorado theater. There are many unanswered questions. How did an unemployed college student afford to purchase tens of thousands of dollars worth of weapons, ammo, tactical ballistic gear, and explosives? Who was the mysterious man in the theater that an eyewitness saw opening the back door and leaving it unlatched so the gunman could enter? And why are the police denying that there was an accomplice? Was he an organizer? I'm talking about Mr. Holmes. Was he an organizer for the San Diego chapter of the Occupy Wall Street movement? And the leftists such as Mayor Bloomberg are calling for new gun controls. Why aren't they calling for controls on Hollywood and the producing of these vile, violent movies? Bottom line is, I saw it coming. I knew that something dark and sinister would be released through this movie on July 20. Just watch the trailer online. The Illuminati is telling us what is ahead. They released the spirits of mass murder. And mass murder may be ahead for the people who attend the Olympic Games in London starting this Friday. I think the Luciferian Illuminists are plotting a mass human sacrifice in London. It remains to be seen whether they dare to pull it off when so many people are aware that something strange is going on with the Olympic Games security, as we reported in June. The opening ceremony features witches' cauldrons and a mysterious 80-foot tall creature that will be unveiled on Friday. Security is in shambles. The British Army has been called in. Body bags for 800,000 corpses are stored near the stadium, and 100,000 troops, mostly American and German, are stationed outside London to evacuate the city. I was not surprised to read in the Sunday Times that Israeli agents fear an attack on the Olympic Games by none other than who? Of course, Iran. Mossad fears Iranian agents will pull off a spectacular act of terrorism sometime during the Games, which end on August 12. One London newspaper reported even the speculation that Iranian missiles could reach London and strike the stadium. Here's an interesting tidbit of information. What is the code name of the secret operation involving the Stuxnet computer virus that attacked Iran's computers? It was Operation Olympic Games. So I ask you, what is the connection between cyber warfare and the Olympic Games? You tell me. More signs the war is coming quickly. Turkish newspapers reported that Turkey dispatched batteries of ground-to-air missiles to the border with Syria on Sunday. A senior Iranian cleric said Tehran will attack Tel Aviv if Israel makes the slightest move against Iran. Debkafal reported that Israeli, Turkish, Jordanian armies plus American armed forces in the Middle East are on full alert to move quickly if there are signs that Syria is moving chemical weapon arsenals towards Lebanon. And Syria warned today it would use its chemical and biological weapons against invading foreign troops. So we may see the fulfillment of Isaiah 17:1 this year. Financial markets around the world were rocked today by troubling news out of Europe. Clearly, the situation in Europe has gone from bad to worse in a matter of days. Spanish and Italian regulators banned short selling of financial stocks and securities today after markets fell sharply on fears that both countries may need full bailout soon. Spain's Catalonia region is days away from formally requesting a bailout. That follows the bailout request last Friday from Valencia. Italy's financial situation darkened today with the admission that 10 Italian cities are at risk of bankruptcy. The cities include Naples, Palermo, and Tuscany. And German and Spanish officials are holding emergency talks on Tuesday about Germany bailing out Spain. The London Times reported this morning that the IMF will pull the plug on Greece in September and boot the country out of the euro monetary zone. A decision must be made by September 12. Do you remember what the prayer intercessor in Texas told my friend Pat Six last month? She heard during prayer the words bank run. And when Pat asked her, did the Lord tell you when this bank run would happen? She said anytime after September 11 and before October 1st. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you about the meaning of this next story. The U.S. Marine Corps has activated 3 law enforcement battalions. Each battalion has 500 Marines who will act as military cops on the streets of cities. And if you think they've been activated for duty in Afghanistan, you are sleepwalking. I'm Rick Wiles. You're listening to True News. We'll take a break. I'll be back in a minute with my first guest who will tell you about a threat of war from a top Chinese general.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
This is Max McLean. How can you express your gratitude for God's grace? Listen to the Bible from 1 Thessalonians 5. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Do not put out the Spirit's fire. Do not treat prophecies with contempt. Test everything. Hold on to the good. Avoid every kind of evil. May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. From 1 Thessalonians 5. Listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
The Bible says that faith comes by hearing. Be able to hear the Word of God today and every day. To hear more, go to radiobible.org.
Well, you're listening to True News, your listener-supported alternative source for world news, analysis, and commentary. I'm Rick Wiles. In late June, I mentioned a Washington Times article written by Mr. Miles Yu. He writes a weekly column for the Washington Times titled Inside China, and he closely monitors statements by top Chinese People's Liberation Army military officials. According to Mr. Yu, PLA Major General Ping recently offered an alarming assessment that a future war with the USA is coming as a result of what the general called American containment policies. His hawkish comments were made last December at an event hosted by the Xinhua news agency in Beijing. An abbreviated transcript was published June 21st on a Chinese military website. Mr. Yu is on the telephone. Mr. Yu, who is General Ping, and why does it matter what he says?
Well, General Peng is known as a hawk in the PLA circle, and he has been he's a long track record of sorry, that's my child. He has been known for making all sorts of statements, hyping up this tension And much of the hype actually conforms to the national sentiment that somehow U.S. has this well-coordinated conspiracy against China in every possible aspect. He made a speech last year, end of last year, and it was transcribed and it was published in the official newspaper. And this is where my column came in, and I look at it, and this was extremely alarming. And what the net effect has been is to put enormous pressure on the civilian government as well as the all public channels of media, and to sort of follow the heartline of the PLA. And this is actually very alarming.
Specifically, what has upset General Ping about U.S. policies?
Well, he represents a very large portion of the Chinese military establishment. What upsets him was a whole bunch of issues, not necessarily related to the United States, but, for example, in China's territorial disputes with virtually all of China's neighbors in East Asia, somehow the Chinese military establishment has been trying to find the United States as the ultimate backer of all these disputants, the challengers to China's vast claims to territorial sovereign rights. So, for example, if China threatened Vietnam, and U.S. would say, well, do not use force to settle any territorial dispute in this area because that might interrupt and disrupt international maritime transportation and communications. And China will say, well, the U.S. should not make any noise or should make any statement in this regard. So therefore, U.S. is secretly backing Vietnam. So this is basically a conspiracy theory that is very deeply rooted in a mindset of the PLA.
And he believes that the USA is deliberately encircling China to contain it.
Not only he, but also virtually the entire official media controlled by the Chinese Communist Party has been saying this almost on a daily basis.
Is there a growing anti-American sentiment in China?
As a matter of fact, anti-American sentiment on surface has subsided a little bit because you don't see much. That does not alleviate the seriousness of the matter because the stage of talking about anti-Americanism is over. There are a lot of things inside China. People are resorting to actions. For example, China's spectacular build-up of the military force is also another expression of this kind of anti-Americanism because they really see America as the number one enemy of China on China's road to supremacy in that area. In Chinese word, it's a great revival of Chinese nation.
Now, did General Ping in his speech to Xinhua News Agency, did he openly imply that China will go to war with the USA?
Oh, yes, he did. He not only this, he said this inexorable path toward a confrontation between these two countries. And U.S. is established superpower. China is upcoming, and somehow the U.S. is in trouble, and therefore U.S. is looking at a rising China with jealousy and suspicion. So that's why he believes the United States has every reason to contain China, and China does not want to be contained. Therefore, the confrontation is inevitable.
Did he indicate whether he thought this coming confrontation between China and the USA would be something on the seas with the Chinese Navy and the U.S. Navy, or did he indicate that this may become a nuclear confrontation?
Well, of course, nobody is willing to play another nuclear gambit because that would alarm both nations. As it happened in the early 1990s when one Chinese general said if the U.S. somehow getting involved with the China's military action in Taiwan Strait, they're going to nuke Los Angeles. That was the very earlier case, and that was a really infamous case. And no, he did not mention any nuclear confrontation. What he did mention was that the U.S. and China will confront on several aspects, but he also attacked the U.S. as a so-called air-sea battle. In other words, the United States has a strategic readiness plan, and that is to coordinate air and sea assets to counter China's so-called anti-access denial strategy against the U.S. Navy in the area. Now, mind you, the United States has been maintaining a very robust naval and military presence in Western Pacific since the end of World War II. And we still have tens of thousands of troops in Okinawa as well as in the Korean Peninsula. So there's nothing new about the U.S. Military presence in the Western Pacific. So it is absolutely ludicrous for General Penn to suggest that somehow U.S. has been building up a military presence in Western Pacific just to contain China, because we have been there for a long time.
Now, earlier this year, there were a lot of rumors about a political coup inside the Chinese Communist Party. Specifically, what happened?
Well, the coup actually, is a rumor during the crisis of the so-called Bo Xilai scandal. Bo Xilai was a communist viceroy. He's a member of the ruling Politburo. He was also the party chief in the southwestern metropolis of Chongqing, which has somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 million, which is a very big, important industrial base in China's rear echelon. He was involved in a political scandal whereby his wife is allegedly killed a British businessman, her business partner. So the issue became public, and she was arrested, and the party chief of Chongqing, Mr. Bo Xilai, the Politburo member, was sacked. The funny thing is, Mr. Bo belonged to a member of the belonged to a group of a very powerful elite. That is the so-called the princelings, the sons and daughters of the high first-generation revolutionaries, and who are now in charge of many aspects of key Chinese state. So it's very hard to get rid of him from the highest echelon of Chinese political structure. So there is for a few weeks there is a sort of an indolence of actions from the Politburo. In other words, the current leadership under General Secretary Hu Jintao didn't know what to do with Mr. Bo. And during this sort of brief period of inaction, there are all sorts of rumors spreading around. And of course, the most severe one was the military coup. And it looks like it's credible for a while, but before long, we all know that the Chinese People's Liberation Army did listen to the party. So the party put the control back on the army very firmly.
Mm-hmm. And what about the rumor that President Hu's phone calls were being monitored?
Well, his phone call being monitored, this was also one of the things that came out as a result of Mr. Bo's police chief's defection, or his attempted defection to the U.S. consulate in China. And he sort of indicated that somehow Mr. Bo has instructed him to wiretap the leadership conversations at the very top. Now, mind you, this kind of a secretly taping leadership conversation is nothing new in China, because in a country like that, words from the highest level matter. So all the underlings will try to figure out exactly what's being said on the highest level. So in the 60s and the 70s, for example, the late dictator of China, Mao Zedong, his phone was tapped as well, not because of his underlings trying to do anything harm to him. Rather, on the opposite, they tried to figure out what the heck the government, the leader was thinking and talking about. So I think this is the context that we should be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also reported that the Communist Party demanded that all PLA senior officials disclose their personal assets in order to crack down on corruption. So is there a power struggle underway between the Communist Party and the military? Yeah,
well, this matter is a little bit complicated. Public disclosure of personal assets has always been the popular call. During the Internet age, China has hundreds of millions of Internet users. They all sporadically come up with calls like this. And no communist leadership member has been willing to practice just that. So it's kind of odd for the civilian leadership to demand the military generals to disclose their assets. So it has been speculated very strongly by a lot of experts that this was used by the civilian leadership to sort of purify, to purge many people inside the PLA, and almost as some kind of a club dangling over the head of those military generals, say, hey, if you don't if you don't toe the party line, I'm going to disclose your private assets, and that is going to be a very strong reason to dismiss a lot of officials. Recently, there have been several high-ranking Chinese military officials who have been dismissed on account of corruption.
Okay, Chinese Rear Admiral, I believe Zhang, stated that there were more than 1 million Chinese traitors in the country. Who does he consider a traitor?
Well, he thinks China has become too pro-West and pro-American in particular, and he believes there have been a lot of Chinese diplomats, a lot of scholars, economists who have been acting in the interest of foreign powers, particularly in the United States. He believes those people are not patriotic enough. That's basically one of his major lines. Well, again, this is a reflection of the hard line of the military.
So, Mr. Yu, is there a possibility that sometime in the future the hardliners in the PLA will say among themselves, we have to take action, that the Communist Party is letting too much stuff happen, and the military leaders are going to have to step in, and we're going to have to confront the USA?
Well, this is a very good question because it can be answered in two ways. One is if you look at a historical trajectory, that seems to be the case. If you think about just what happened in Japan in 1930s, 1940s, that's exactly what happened. That is, a increasingly hawkish military believed increasingly that the civilian government is selling out the country to the Americans, to the Allies. So the government has been corrupted. Government has been unpatriotic. That's why the military had to take care of the situation. And that's why there are so many assassinations of civilian leadership in the 30s. So eventually, that was a prelude to the Pearl Harbor attacks. Is China going to be like that? It's very hard to tell. That's because in China, there's almost total control of the press by the party. So there's no robust debate within the party, even within China, as to who is more hawkish, who's less hawkish, because the only voice allowed in public arena is the hawkish views. So that's why you can see it's very safe to say hawkish, to express hawkish views, and without being rebutted by robust counterpoints.
Mm-hmm. Now, Admiral Zhang, he believes the CIA is waging psychological operations and disinformation campaigns against the PLA hawks.
Not only Admiral Zhang, a whole bunch of other military guys believe in that. Yes.
Okay. Now, let's turn our attention to Venezuela. You reported that China is set to provide Hugo Chavez's socialist government with military vehicles. What's happening in South America? Well,
Hugo Chavez has been looked upon as a strategic asset to China, but also sometimes could be as a strategic liability as well, because this guy is very precarious and very unpredictable. One thing that's predictable to China, that is Hugo Chavez's fanatic anti-American sentiment. So that's why China has been steadily supporting that aspect of the Chavez regime. Chavez, on the other hand, had a problem acquiring advanced military technologies. The Russians were very cautious in helping Chavez militarily, so China became a logical choice. And Chavez, mind you, has also been very actively courting a strategic partnership with Iran. And Iran's Ahmadinejad visited Caracas several times, and they have been doing some kind of weapons technology swapping as well. Chavez did get quite a few of Chinese military support in a form by way of low interest loans. China, in other words, China gave Venezuela money and with which to buy Chinese weapons, and Venezuela, of course, is going to export oil to China to pay back the loan.
Okay, so this is a military weapons for oil deal.
That's exactly right.
How many dollars? What are we talking about in U.S. dollars?
We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. The exact number I wrote in my column, I don't remember right now.
If I recall, I think it was $500 million.
Something like that. That's a sizable number of money. And also, if you look at it way back in 2008, and the Chinese gave Hugo Chavez quite a few of, I remember about 12, quite advanced trainer jets.
Okay,
and what Venezuela right now is getting from the Chinese with the $500 million loan is basically the Chinese amphibious assault weapons, assault tanks. Those are very, very good. China, that's actually one of China's best, and they were willing to give to Chavez, and that's quite surprising to me.
Okay, so China loaned $500 million to Chavez's socialist government to buy amphibious assault tanks from China, and then Venezuela is going to pay off the loan with cheap oil.
That's exactly right.
Okay, one last question. We got tension growing in the South China Sea as Chinese Navy flexes its muscles against other Asian nations over fishing rights. Tell us about the proposal to train and arm Chinese fishermen.
Well, this is a strategy that has been working out, that has been sort of proposed, and actually has been in practice for quite a few months now. What happened was that China had territorial disputes in the South China Sea with 4 or 5 nations there, or the most prominent of whom were the Philippines and Vietnam. And the Chinese Navy, of course, will be the ultimate arbiter of this, because Chinese has been developing its naval force in the area for over 20-some years. However, United States, since 2008, when Secretary of the State Hillary Clinton went to Vietnam and say the peaceful situation in the South China Sea is actually also Americans' core national interest. And that basically put a stake there. And President Obama also said we're going to pivot to Asia Pacific. So in other words, any military action in the South China Sea will necessarily involve some aspect of American involvement. Because of that, Chinese government is saying, okay, we're not going to use our Navy to counter the American Navy. Obviously, American Navy will be much stronger than the Chinese Navy right now. So their strategy is that to send the civilian vessels under military command to go over South China Sea to provoke the tension with other challenging countries, such as Vietnam and the Philippines. And when the Chinese fishing boats go around and it ratcheted up tensions, and then the next layer will be Chinese government maritime surveillance ships, as well as the government ships of fishery bureau. And then the last layer would be the Chinese Navy. So far they have been sort of with the fishermen going first wave, and then followed by the government maritime surveillance ship, and then the Navy will show up. This is exactly what happened in the Scarborough showdown with the Philippines some 4 months ago.
Okay, so they're going to militarize thousands of Chinese fishing vessels to confront U.S. military presence in the South China Sea.
That's what has been suggested. I believe that suggestion has been adopted, has been practiced, and that's why you see virtually every skirmishes, every tension between China and its neighbors, Japan, South Korea, even North Korea, and then last week, Russia, Philippines, and Vietnam, is always started out with the fishermen doing illegal fishing and ramming the Coast Guard vessels of the other countries.
How many Chinese fishermen are they going to train and arm?
Well, this gentleman who I wrote in my wrote about in my column suggested they're going to train about 100,000. And that's very easy for China because there are many, many times more fishermen than that.
100,000 Chinese fishermen in the South China Sea with military weapons and the backing of the Chinese PLA saying, go for it.
Yes, they will say that. On the other hand, though, this is a rather strange suggestion because if you arm a fisherman, and that will make many of them target of legitimate anti-piracy operations by different countries. So, in other words, you also have to see downside of that. I don't think the Chinese strategists to see that part.
All right, Mr. Yu, out of time. I'd like to have you back in the future. We'll continue this discussion of Chinese military strategy. My guest, Mr. Miles Yu, he writes a weekly column called Inside China for the Washington Times. Thank you, Mr. Yu.
You're welcome.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast.
Well, welcome back to True News for Monday, July 23rd, 2012. I'm Rick Wiles. During a fast during the first week of May, I clearly heard in my spirit the word of the Lord instructing me that people had May, June, and July to make the right decisions. He said the fate of many people would be sealed during May, June, and July by the decisions they make or fail to make. Well, we are nearing the end of the 90-day time frame. And the message wasn't that the decisions had to be fully implemented by the end of July, but we simply had to make hard, firm decisions in our walk with God and for the preparation of our safety of our family by the end of July. Well, the danger level in the USA and the world is rising quickly. I warned you months ago that something dark and sinister would appear on July 20 with the release of the Batman movie, The Dark Knight Rises. It did appear. I believe the spirit of mass murder was released. And we are days away from the opening of the Olympic Games in London. As you know, by listening to this program in June, we brought you the information from a high-level intelligence source in Great Britain that a nuclear device was smuggled into London to be exploded during the Games. We also brought you the information from a reporter who went undercover and got a job as a security guard for the G4S company that has the contract for security. And he told us that security for the Games is a big joke. It's non-existent. And that anything could happen at the Games. He also said that there were body bags stored for 800,000 corpses and 100,000 troops, mostly foreign, positioned outside of London to evacuate the city. Since that interview, the whole world has learned that the security for the Games is truly a joke. It's the biggest story in Great Britain, as the company G4S has admitted that they cannot supply the 10,000 security guards for the opening of the Games this Friday. It's so bad that the British Army has been called in to supply troops as security guards. This is a mess. I don't know what's going to happen in London. I pray that if there is an evil plan for the London Games, I just pray it is stopped and there is not a mass bloodshed. But what do we know about the Games? We know that the opening ceremony has been described by the Daily Mail newspaper as dark and satanic. There are witches' cauldrons on the stage. There's an 80-foot-high creature on the stage that's presently covered up with a tarp that will be unveiled this Friday. I've actually speculated that they may be planning a mass human sacrifice. I know that sounds bizarre, but folks, the world is getting bizarre. And something may be planned for the Games that will change the world. I mean, just over the weekend, as I've told you in the beginning of the program, the Israelis are now saying they believe Iran will attack the stadium. You realize if that happens, If there's an attack, whether Iran does it or not, if there's a bomb that goes off in the stadium, you know that World War III is on, right? You understand that. And on top of that, both the European and the American economic systems are in a state of implosion. I don't know how long that they can keep the illusion going with smoke and mirrors. Scandals are erupting each week, revealing the depth of corruption in the financial markets. And Barry Soetoro, the Marxist in the White House, is showing his true colors, and I'm referring to his recent comment a week or so ago that business owners really didn't build their businesses. The government did it for them. Somebody else did it for them. He's setting the stage for the confiscation of private property. He is a Marxist. And there's no way that this man can win re-election in a fair and honest election. He just can't do it. Most of the people in this country are waiting for the day he packs up and leaves. And there's only a small percentage of Americans that would actually vote for this clown. So there's no way he can win a fair election. But I'm convinced he will stay in power. He will remain in the White House, whether he loses outright or whether he wins by crooked means. He will remain in the White House. I'm convinced of it. And I'm also convinced he will take off his mask after the November elections, and he will reveal himself of who he really is and what he really is. Well, private investigator Doug Hagmann, as you know, has been communicating with a high-level source in Homeland Security who simply can go by the code name Rosebud. And this is a source that Doug has known for many years. And this man is at the highest levels of the Department of Homeland Security. And this information has been brought forth publicly through Doug on this radio program. And we know that we have a growing audience at the Department of Homeland Security, so we welcome all the DHS agents. And we hope you open up your eyes and realize that inside the Department of Homeland Security, there are traitors to the United States of America, and it's your duty, your responsibility to out them and expose them. And we also want the people who are the traitors to know that we will get you someday. You will not get away with this. You'll be hunted down like Nazis were hunted down for decades around the world. Well, anyhow, Rosebud has given Doug some additional new information. Doug's on the line right now. Doug, what's the latest information from your source at Homeland Security?
Well, Rick, first of all, thank you very much for having me. And the information I got was obtained from a face-to-face meeting last week, and I won't get into the details of that, but except to say that I was rather stunned by the appearance of my source, who looked stressed and aged, if you will, and also very concerned, and that concern was noted, that deep level of concern. Now, I should note that my source is a God-fearing man, and one of us, if you will, one of the people who are concerned about the erosion of rights and about the direction that this country is going and the leaders are taking this country. Now, having said that, I've received a lot of emails concerning this particular source, who in fact, a couple of emails I've gotten called him a traitor. Just let me say this. He's there for a reason, and just because he's providing or just because he's there and providing this information to us does not mean he's not doing anything proactive in terms of attempting to mitigate or perhaps even stop things that are coming. So,
a traitor to who? A traitor to the United States of America, the American people, or a traitor to the regime that's overthrowing the constitutional republic?
Well, no, he is actually. Well, let me rephrase that. I've received emails that he's a coward and a traitor to us, the people of America, by staying in his position and not going public and not outing, everything.
No. He's being used by God.
Exactly
where he's at.
Exactly. exactly. And I know that we've had that conversation before, and again, as a God-fearing Christian, he understands the role that he is to play, or he believes he is to play. So his discernment, spiritual discernment, is as far as I'm concerned, on target. But the information he gave me was quite substantiated information before that you and I had spoken about, but with a little bit more urgency than before. First of all, he had said, "Look, I don't think basically, I don't think I'm going to have much more time. I don't think there's more time left, and I don't know how many more times that we could talk, we could see each other talk, or have dialogue." And it's interestingly, recently a piece came out where the Obama administration is putting the screws to a lot of so-called trying to plug leaks with respect to classified information, and using, for example, the cyber attacks on Iran as an example. He's ordered Panetta to launch an investigation. He's ordered Holder to appoint U.S. attorneys to investigate these leaks of classified information. Not Holder for the Department of Defense, Panetta for the Department of Defense, and Holder for Department of Homeland Security, and even the White House. That said, there's pressure being applied internally on everyone with a security classification, and there's 4 million of them.
And so it's becoming very dangerous for sources such as Rosebud to tell you anything, because they're going to lock them up.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're subjected to random polygraphs, or if they're suspected of leaking classified information, not only polygraphs, but pretty rough interrogations, and then.
Okay, so the Fuhrer is getting upset. Things are getting very bad there. Now, that said, what he told me was this. And people really need to listen to this, because this goes right along, Rick, with everything you've said. He said that based on everything that he has seen, that Obama has no plans whatsoever on leaving the White House, and that is by any means necessary. Now, it's interesting because the Ulsterman report recently came out with apparently a military insider that said the same thing. But the fact of the matter is, my source cited the run-up to whatever event is going to take place, and he's not exactly certain what it might be. But, you could look at the economy perhaps as a trigger, events taking place in London as a trigger, whether that involves the Olympics or not, but most certainly with respect to the elections, he does not believe that the elections will be fair or will go off as planned, and that could be, again, preceded by an event to take place here in this country. For example, we've received reports that there are Iranian assets, Islamic terrorists, in mosques across the country. Shiite mosques ready to strike. And if you remember the paralysis caused by the D.C. snipers back a number of years ago, think of it that way, except on the national level. They're expecting something to take place that will necessitate the Department of Homeland Security to essentially claim martial law, or to institute martial law at the orders of Obama, restrict travel, restrict trade, and to make this into a full Marxist communist type country. And it's interesting because the DHS is planning a response for this chaos, this civil rioting, this insurrection, whatever you want to call it. And one thing that my source told me was, to them, this chaos is not happening fast enough. There are people that want to see this rioting, this civil uprising, this infighting inside the United States happen quicker, so this can be done, because Obama has not accomplished what he set out to do for his first term, or the goals that have been set before him. He needs more time to turn this country into a third world
regime, to the extent that the global elite wanted to be turned into. So
Doug, that confirms what I've said about the TSA. They're deliberately provoking the American people to respond. They're waiting for the day that somebody goes off inside an airport and just beats the snot out of some TSA agents.
Indeed, you're correct. And this is one thing that I did not particularly write about, but I had spoken to my source about, is the fact that they are relying on the apathy of the American people not to respond en masse to the TSA checkpoints. And the recent shooting in Aurora with respect to the movie theaters, the movie theater shooting, that is opening the doors for the TSA now to roll out, and this was planned before this, but this gives us additional credence. Hey, let's roll out the scanners, let's roll out the TSA assets to movie theaters.
Gosh, I didn't even think about this, Doug.
TSA
scanners at the theaters.
Absolutely. And again, aside from lining people's pockets, because these scanners cost money, and of course, for example, the Chertoff Group associated with OSI, having monetary affiliations with the makers of the scanners, the Rapiscan. OSI is owned, or Rapiscan is owned by OSI, and the Chertoff Group is tied into that. I mean, think of the crotch bomber of 2009. What happened after that? There were 17 scanners that were deployed.
That's right.
And after that bombing, they just exponentially multiplied. So this is the evil nature behind this, and with regard to the Aurora shooting, this administration and the TSA and the DHS are going to exploit this.
Doug, your source told you, your Homeland Security source told you that he knows that Obama is an imposter, a Manchurian candidate.
Yes. In fact, excuse me, this goes back to previous interviews or previous contacts I've had with him, where he said, look, there's documentation within DHS that can prove the fact that this man is not who he says he is. And in fact, Barack Hussein Obama is not even his legal name. What is his legal name? Well, perhaps it's Barry Soetoro, based on the fact of adoption.
But we really don't know.
But that's the whole thing. The president's dog, or the man who calls himself or is the president, is occupying the Oval Office. His dog has got better papers than he does. So this whole thing, I mean, there are people that know that this man is a Manchurian candidate. He was selected. He was put in there. And one of the reasons he was put in there, and again, this is off of, not included in what I wrote, and exclusive to your show, is the fact that this man has been told to wage war on the Christian values of this country, on Christianity, on Judeo-Christian values, on the moral fabric of this country, to rip it down, and to do other things that involve our belief system. And that's part and parcel to our, the fabric of this country.
And your source said that Obama has brought in hardcore communists and placed them in high-level government positions.
Yes. And think of the 42-plus czars. A lot of those circumvented the normal clearance, the security clearance, and a good portion of his czars would not, as a matter of fact, survive any type of background screening, nor would Obama himself. But that said, Obama has placed known communist sympathizers in positions of communist sympathizers in position of power within the Defense Department, within the Department of State, within the Department of Environmental Protection.
And he's now putting one in the Labor Department.
That's correct. So, I mean, again, and one thing my source really reiterated was the fact that Obama is operating on a timetable, and he's behind in that timetable. Whether it's because of his propensity to play golf or take vacations, I don't know. But the fact is, those who selected him and the real power brokers behind Obama the man are upset that he's off schedule.
Okay, now one of those communists is Valerie Jarrett, his top advisor, and her parents were members of the Communist Party.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And your source said that Jarrett and Big Butch Napolitano are conversing quite regularly?
They appear to be running the show. Jarrett appears to be giving orders to Napolitano with respect to, tightening the screws on the Homeland Security front. In fact, Jarrett appears to be running the entire show, according to my source. And but he can only speak to the DHS part of it. However, the collateral information that is received suggests that Jarrett is also heavily involved in all aspects of Obama's administration.
Okay, and Rosebud told you that he's been privy to contingency plans ordered by Valerie Jarrett, the communist?
Yes. There is an actual document. Now, whether it is a paper or a virtual document that is, in a computer format, I am not certain, but there's a document that does exist that provides for contingency plans to ensure or assure that Obama remains in the office of the presidency, regardless of what the election might.
And these contingency plans provide for the temporary suspension of U.S. elections?
That's correct.
And for travel restrictions?
That's correct.
And for gun confiscation?
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. I cannot add anything to that. I mean, if you look at it, of course, all of those are components of martial law. So,
well, look at the news we had over the weekend. The U.S. Marine Corps has activated 3 battalions of law enforcement troops, 500 Marines each.
Yes.
I mean, are you really clueless about what this is all about, folks? They're activating the military cops.
And they've been training in Afghanistan troops to conduct house-to-house searches, and also training them in the skill of detention.
And you know what else they did in Afghanistan and Iraq? They rounded up every fighting age male in the country, and they scanned their eyes and their fingers.
I did hear that. Now, I'm not sure. Is that program, Rick, still taking place?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Right.
They've got a database of every male in Afghanistan who is old enough to fight.
Okay, I received some information this morning from someone outside of someone in the military, actually, that I've had correspondence with before, who alerted me to certain things, including the fact that the training that's going on in Afghanistan and Iraq of our military personnel, in conjunction with other allies, is in preparation for what's going to be taking place domestically. So that goes hand in hand with a report of the militarization or the military police report, which you just mentioned.
Okay, Doug, I've only got 1 minute.
Yes.
There is a Sheriff Joe Arpaio component to this information. Talk about that.
Well, there are a few disturbances to this plan. The Arpaio investigation is a huge thorn in the side of the Obama administration. They found something. Arpaio's group found something, and I'm not exactly certain, and I'm not sure my source is certain what they found. But whatever they found is giving the Obama administration, Obama, Jarrett, some pretty heavy concerns, pretty big concerns. So I would watch the development of that.
And pray for the safety of Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
And Mike Zullo and every one. And also the second thing is Congress investigating Fast and Furious. They want that put to bed ASAP.
I've heard a rumor that Sheriff Joe found documents in the British archives.
Okay.
That's nobody ever thought about looking in Great Britain for birth records about Obama. Now, I don't know if it's true. I don't have a confirmation on it, but that's what I've heard.
Well, think back really quick to the Perm incident in Perm, Russia, where the Lugar/Obama the delegation was stopped for 3 hours, and that does make sense with the British component. That
he was a spy for Great Britain.
Perhaps
he was on the payroll of the British intelligence agency. Doug Hagmann, listen, if you want to read the full report, Doug has it written out on his website, HomelandSecurityUS.com. HomelandSecurityUS.com. It's under the headline Sartorial's 2012 Election Contingency. Doug, thank you. Appreciate you coming on True News today and keeping us informed.
Well, God bless you, Rick.
Well, after hearing that information from Doug Hagmann and his source at Homeland Security, I think this is the appropriate time for me to share two things with you that I've been wanting to talk about. First of all, Rush Limbaugh had a prophetic dream. Now, you know things are getting wild and crazy when talk radio hosts such as Rush Limbaugh start talking about prophetic dreams on their programs. I mean, for heaven's sakes, they're taking our format from us, you know. But that's how it is. God is speaking to everybody right now. Anyhow, from what I remember, Rush Limbaugh had a dream in which he was a slave in Egypt, and he was working in the desert building a sphinx that looked like Barack Obama. Now, I don't know how Rush Limbaugh received that dream or how he interpreted it, if he thought it was just a bad dream from eating pizza, but I personally think God was speaking to Rush Limbaugh and telling him that this man in the White House is a future Pharaoh, and he's going to enslave the American people. Now, that brings me to the second thing. Several weeks ago, I had a feeling that Pastor T.D. Hale in Ohio had another dream, and I asked my son-in-law Marshall to contact him, and Pastor Hale wrote back and said, yes, I did have another dream that I've not told people about, and this is it. He said, while I was not thinking about any certain thing or anything on my mind, I went to bed as usual. Sometime in the middle of the night, I went into another dream. I was standing in a building that was very odd. Only after telling a few close friends that I trust with certain things did I find out where and what that building was. I was standing in what I now know as the Kirkland Temple in Ohio. I saw the seats that went up where the leaders sit as I was standing right in front of the pulpit. I saw guarding the staircase going up each side a half-man, half-falcon creature. Something I saw in a book about Egypt. I saw Mitt Romney standing there, but was hindered from walking up the staircase. I heard the voice of the Lord say very loudly, "Judgment rest upon this nation." And literally, I came out of my bed. Pastor Hale said, I knew when I woke up the spirit of Egypt was upon America and that we have a Pharaoh in the White House. The leader of this nation has the people under bondage. The falcon-like creature was standing in the way of the next leader to ascend up the staircase. I'm certain who the next leader will be. I believe as certain as I write you that that we are a nation that can no longer repent. Well, the message throughout this program is very obvious. We have a Pharaoh in the White House, a man who's going to enslave the American people, a man who's going to be a cruel and evil taskmaster, and he is going to come after the Christians. Pharaoh will come after God's people to persecute God's people. He will round up and imprison God's people. This can only be stopped by mass repentance, immediate mass repentance. Nothing else, political, nothing is going to stop us except America falling on its knees and crying out to Almighty God, save us, oh God.